All right, I think you might be in for a treat if you enjoy blue on blue hardcore magic as much as I would like to think that you do. Then you should enjoy this video quite a bit. This was very fun. So one of a self-described fan of the channel, of this channel and of Brian's, jumped into some games with me and definitely pushed the Breya deck to the limits, and which also resulted in me making one small adjustment. So the adjustment I made was I realized that when in the hardcore matches that are often decided in the first couple of turns, or at least the important positioning happens in the first couple of turns, that I think land tax may actually be too slow, and it's very important to have Soul Ring control, and other artifact kill. So I ended up cutting one of the third island that I had for the tax, despite the fact that I've lauded how great it is to have, and it is, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing often is killing that Soul Ring. So I cut the third island, and I made it Nadakar Waste. Now, I don't have the complementary Underground River, but this deck is running Urborg. So actually what I've done is evened out the white and black mana. There's one land that produces black and one land that produces white, and of course I've got an extra blue in there because Nadakar Waste is a dual rather than just something along the lines of, say, Flagstones of Chokair. And that works out nicely. And then I took the text and I made it Fragmentize. And that works out nicely because there are, if I go sort by color, exactly even numbers of white and black cards. If you take into account the splash colors, Vindicate is both, so it doesn't really count. So you've got white, white, black, and then you say, where's the other black card? Well, it's actually Mystical Teachings Flashback, which takes black mana. So black, black, white, white. Both black and white. So exactly even numbers of black and white cards and even numbers of black and white mana. So I kind of like that tiny little balance, although quite frankly that could just be my OCD kicking in there or whatever. So a little touch of something. But anyway, those are the changes I made. So now I want to hit the games and let's take a look at it. So first I'm going to start with a game that I had that was a lot of fun. This was pre-adjustment against B Hell 001. And then we'll move into the games. The games against Darth Longsaber are the games where I was pressured. And I'll hit the in-between games as well. And I'm definitely going to cover the one where I lost here. Conveniently, somebody had asked about whether or not, said in one of the recent videos that they had never seen me lose. Well, you're about to see what that looks like, and hopefully, and the game that you're going to see me lose is a good one, but it kind of fits the exact description of my comment, which was that usually when I lose it's because I just get blown out. Anyway, this first game though against BHL 001, they're playing Damia Sage of Stone. I have a great draw. I get first turn Clamp, second turn Spellseeker. I'm going to Spellseeker for Mind Twist, which forces them to play in a kind of defensive fashion, right? Now they have to constantly be aware that they could get Mind Twisted at any moment. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and Clamp, Spellseeker, and produce Thopter so I can draw another 2 cards next turn, or 4 by producing a second Thopter and then clamping them both. Well, that was the plan, but Rec Sage wrecked my plan, so I'll go ahead and just play Teferi, create a blocker for Teferi, untap 2 lands so that I have Mana Leak ready to go here. Couldn't quite Mind Twist their hand there, and it made more sense to get my card advantage engine running anyway. Now my opponent's in a really horrible position because if they do nothing, they're going to lose to Teferi and Dovin, and of course Jitte now. If they do something, then they know that whatever the case, they would need enough mana to make a move and back it up with a counter because they'll get Mind Twisted if they don't. And that's pretty hard to do when you're behind on mana, behind on board, and behind on cards in hand. Basically, they're behind in every way that you can be. And with that, my opponent scoops. I think it's the Jitte activation here. Of course, Teferi's going to untap 2 lands. So what I do is equip, attack, make sure I leave the 2 mana up to Mana Leak if they have like removal. Kill the Rec Sage, And then after combat, if I did not cast the Leak, I would have tapped 1 and cast a Wayfarer, and then passed for the turn, and untapped 2 lands, leaving me up 3 mana for Forbid or 2 for Leak, at which point it is 100% over either way. So scooping there was not crazy. And now we move into the first game against Darthlong Saber, who is playing, well, when it comes up. And I have not tested these for bugs, so let's just keep our fingers crossed. But he's playing Zur. So Zur is, so in my opinion, and my opinion differs, I think, from I had a conversation with Brian about this. He believes that Zur should be favored in these matches. I tend to believe Breya should be favored. However, I will say that Zur is much more. So Zur is more lethal because if Zur attacks, you get Necro and you win. So if Zur gets a single attack phase, the game is over. Whereas with Breya, it's not like that. But Breya trumps Zur in the way because provided that you have enough mana, you can basically keep Zur off the table and continue applying pressure. So, and then as far as tools go, oh, sorry about that. Breya is a little bit weaker to mana disruption, but a little bit stronger on being able to disrupt itself due to Duretti and Dak Faden, while Zur has pinpoint disruption in the form of Duress and Thoughtseize, as well as potentially Hymn to Torok and cards of that nature. So it's definitely a close match and should be a pretty good one. But in most cases, the deck should be fairly similar. My opponent's going first here, which is never good against Zur for me. But I have a first turn Wayfarer, which is solid. And I'm going to make a horrible misclick here. So my opponent vamps for a Workshop, shops out a Lantern. I like that play. But I make a huge misplay. I'm trying to click Wasteland, and I click the card right under it, Volcanic. So now I cannot actually waste their shop. So I have to Spellseeker, and I decide to Spellseeker for Mind Twist. And, pardon, let me pause. And my opponent, Mystical Tutors for Force of Will. So I should have Spellseekered probably for Plow, to be honest. But going to get Mind Twist is acceptable, mostly because, you know, what I was expecting to happen is that this turn my opponent goes land Zur, and then I go land Teferi, tuck the Zur. And then from there, I've got Mind Twist, like, pressuring them with a Teferi running, right? Same position I had the last opponent in. Instead, my opponent gets a Trinket Mage into Soul Ring on this turn and misses the land drop, and that's absolutely critical here. So I'm going to Skull Clamp, and my chance to use Weathered Wayfarer is completely gone. And I'm going to attempt to Mind Twist them for 2 to draw out the Force of Will, which my opponent does force, and they use their own Spellseeker. They find their fourth land, so we know that they're holding Soul Ring and 1 question mark. Does not play Zur there, which makes sense because, as you can see, opponent had Mana Drain. So I go ahead and attack for 1, and I'm going to clamp the Wayfarer. So, man, missing out on the I'm still kicking myself because of the Lost Wasteland. But I've got all of the cards out of my opponent's hand, which leaves them with playing Zur as the only option. And that means that I can then run out a Teferi, which my opponent doesn't know about, and tuck that Zur. Now, Teferi will die to Trinket Mage here, but if my opponent taps, as it turns out, they have an extra Ancient Tomb, but taps down into Zur, I have enough mana here to play Breya and kill it immediately. And so I go ahead and do that, plus play an additional land and pass. And my opponent replays it, I just kill it again. Opponent plays it, but has a Pithing Needle to prevent me from killing Zur. Unfortunately for them, I drew a Demonic Tutor, so I get to detoots into Treachery, into Seal of Cleansing, Karn, make a construct, kill their Soul Ring, orb them, attack, and pass. So I go this route because this way, if my opponent kills the Zur, if they draw like Disenchant and they disenchant the Treachery here, then I've got Karn running with Breya and a construct, and I can apply massive amounts of pressure very quickly. Plus, I'll be able to kill the Zur and the Winter Orb is going to kind of gum up. Like if my opponent, say, top decked Yogg-Will here, it's a lot worse for them than it would be if I didn't have the Orb in play. So I want to kind of gum up their mana, the chances that they can recover from this. Like they're not going to draw, for example, Cyclonic Rift or something. So it gets really bad for them to try to get out of this position. So I'm able to win game 1 against Darth Longsaber. Now after that, I had a couple of interim games, and I'll go ahead and run through those just for the sake of completion, I guess. Game against Eremethus that ends on turn 0. As I'm preparing to click the mulligan button, my opponent sees Breya, says, "Oh, another boring Breya deck," and concedes right away. And I was kind of offended. I was like, "What do you mean another boring Breya deck? This is the premier boring Breya deck. What are you talking about?" Anyway, that's fine. I totally understand. It's not everybody's cup of tea. Anyway, the next game was against Nikaya of the Old Ways, and my top card was actually Duretti, and that is very good against black-green, but because of the way my lands are working out here, I go ahead and tuck it anyway, and because I have Teferi. However, I top deck a Lotus there, so I use the opportunity to go ahead and take a peek with Sensei's Divining Top. When I don't see what I want, I Mystical Tutor. And I Mystical Tutor for Necro. Don't know if my opponent's scratching their head, but surely you see what the play is here. If you've been watching the channel long enough, you should know what this is. Oh my goodness, I have hiccups. It's really hard to record like this. But yes, definitely it was a go get Necropotence and refill my hand turn. I've got tons of mana advantage, and I can play Teferi in a moment. And by getting more cards, I'm just going to further cement my mana advantage, as you can clearly see. So my opponent runs out I don't know, some kind of... It's a 4/3 that does things. What is that? Gore, Claw, Terror of... Not me. Anyway, so I run out of mana, steal it, and I did my lands a little bit awkwardly here, but it ends up working out okay. After stealing it, I go ahead and run out to Fairy, tuck their mana source, and start taking extra cards, and then, of course, I was going to top as well, just to see what the next 3 cards are. Top with Necro is a little redundant, but it is useful because of cards like Mystical Tutor. So still not, it's not completely worthless, but using it is often a mite bit silly since you're going to take all the cards anyway. You get all the cards. Anyway, my opponent scoops it up because, well, I had all the cards and they have none. And I move into the next game against Darth Longsaber, and this starts a battle of 3. Ultimately, I ended up winning 75% here, 3 out of 4, but there's another string here, and it starts off with me getting my butt kicked. I get crushed, as a matter of fact, so I'm going to pause. Now, I'm playing against Zur, and if you look at this hand, you'll see a problem, a big problem, really. I did not mulligan a hand that needs to be mulliganed, so why does it need to be mulliganed? Well, here are the reasons. It has no fast mana. It can't kill fast mana. It has no interaction with either Swords to Plowshares, Toxic Deluge, or Counter Magic. And it's got 3 cards that are basically a mulligan. Will is a late game card. Necro goes with Lotus, sure, but not until I get 5 mana, which is going to be quite some time. And then, of course, I have Treachery, which is also a late game card. So basically, this is a 3-card hand. It's Arid Mesa, Fountain, and whatever Preordain can find me. Everything else is garbage in this hand. So a 3-card hand against Zur is clearly worse than mulliganing to 6 cards, presumably a 6-card hand, if all 6 cards are playable, right? So a mulligan actually increases the number of playables in my hand. So this is a bad keep against Zur. Now, against some random opponent playing what it looks like a Timmy deck, yeah, sure, this is fine, but you can keep almost any hand against them. This was 100% mulligan, but I kept it because I was going first thinking, oh, well, I'll find something with Preordain. Well, I find Brainstorm, but that's not going to get me there. And look at my opponent's draw. Incredibly fast. And unfortunately for me, I'm 1 mana away from destroying Crypt or Signet. My opponent vamps into, well, they're 100% going to be able to play Zur here. if they want to. And my only hope is that he doesn't. Alas, so I shuffle in the vain hope of finding a Swords to Plowshares hiding on the top of my library. I play Spellseeker to go get one, and I realize I am a turn too slow. There is no point in playing this out. My opponent will attack, and they will play Necro, and I will lose. This game is over. So I scoop it up. Unfortunately, I just didn't have the goods. And because my opponent's land was a fetch land there, I couldn't even strip mine and try to, you know, like, theoretically I could have strip mined them, and if they didn't have a blue source, then, you know, I might have bought myself some time to get the Seal of Cleansing down on the next turn and then take out, like, their crypt and then, you know, run away with the game, right? But their land was a fetch land, so I couldn't even make that play. There was nothing I could do. And as you can see, here they are, rotting away in my hand. Plus, you know, of course, I tucked the others away with Brainstorm. But here's that triple mulligan, quadruple, quintuple mulligan that I had. So no good, terrible keep, and I got rightfully and fairly punished for it. After that game, I made the adjustment. After, I think it was, yeah, it was that game when I realized that the games were going to be way too fast to be dinking around with land tax. And against a serious opponent, that's probably going to be the case, I would say more consistently than it will be the case that land tax is going to do any work for me. So I made the adjustment to this version after that game, and I don't think it came up at all. But at the very least, I had a slightly better deck. I had to mulligan here, but I did at least lose the die roll. My opponent's got a screaming start again. Look at this, 4 mana on turn 2. I just have land. So I led off with, oh, well, I'm going to pause it. It looked like 4 mana on turn 2, but if you notice, I led off with Scalding Tarn. Their Fellwar Stone produced nothing because I didn't fetch with the Tarn until I got this Command Tower down, at which point the Fellwar Stone produced, you know, all 5 colors. Now, if I had played Cavern of Souls to try to keep Fellwar Stone from producing colored mana, that wouldn't work because Cavern of Souls has the potential to produce 5, therefore Fellwar Stone would produce 5. So I might as well just play the best land and play the Command Tower here. And then to add insult to injury, my opponent runs out of Soul Ring. So I am dying in the mana race, but I have just barely enough to go ahead and leak. And I fetch here with Scalding Tarn. I see a lot of people will fetch Tundra there, but I did not fetch Tundra. I fetch Underground because I already have white covered, and of course I have Tithe, so that's potentially more planes that I can get. But by fetching Underground, if I top decked a Necro, I had a Command Tower Underground City. So you always want to be building your mana base towards having as much blue as you can, 1 white, 1 red, and 3 black. You're trying to get that into play in every game that you play. So always build that way. Don't double up on white if there's no reason to do it. All right, anyway, but there was nothing I could do here. So I just go DT, and I Demonic for Crypt. So this is a little crazy because my opponent's got tons of mana and is easily going to be able to recast Zur. So why did I go get Mana Crypt there? Well, I went and got a Mana Crypt there because my opponent has tons of mana, and they're easily going to be able to recast Zur. But I'm holding Cavern of Souls, and so if I get to slam Souls Breya, because what I expect to happen is they'll play Zur and leave counter magic up, and then I'll go Souls Breya, and then kill their Zur right away with Crypt, and have Talisman to Tithe with to continue to hit mana drops so that I can kill it the next time it comes down as well. So this is basically me realizing that I need to set up so that I can beat their Zur with my Breya and then try to walk my opponent into it. Now, one thing I might have done that would have been a little more valuable could have been to play the Cavern of Souls a little bit earlier, but at least hides it here. So if you notice, my opponent just played Jace, Merchant Scroll, and went and got Force of Will. So a brilliant play, right? You get Jace down, you protect Jace, you win the game. But they don't know that I have an uncounterable Breya coming. So fortunately for me, I even top deck a Fellwar Stone to make it so that, and I play that first before indicating that I might need all of that mana over the course of the next 2 turns. And I'm going to immediately, of course, kill Jace. So I take Jace out, I leave Breya there. Hopefully it doesn't get stolen. But my opponent Mystical Tutors and fetches Mind Twist. So I am getting twisted this game. So my opponent's gotten Jace, a Soul Ring, and a Mind Twist. I got a turn 4 Mana Crypt, turn 3 Mana Crypt. But it is enough with Cavern of Souls to keep my opponent's commander off the table. And I top deck Badlands. Literally the worst land in the entire deck. It is a very bad land. But it's in there because you need the flexibility. Sometimes you have to go get black or red with one of your fetches that doesn't produce, like a Verdant Catacombs, for example, can only get lands that are black. And if you need red mana, this is the land you have to get. So it's in the deck for that reason. So I'm going to play Zur here in order to eat up more of my artifacts, I think. And because he's got enough mana to be able to continue to play. Oh gosh, I hope we don't bug out. This is such a great game. Anyway, to continue to play Zur repeatedly, they can make it so that not only they continue to play Zur, but I fall farther and farther behind by killing all my artifacts. Oh well, that's a bit of a disappointment there. So we did bug out. Anyway, my opponent played Zur there and left up 2 mana. All right, for played Zur there and then tapped 2 mana and went and got something. I don't remember what they fetched. Anyway, on my turn, I topped... they played top. That's what it was. So my opponent plays Zur and then plays Sensei's Divining Top, leaving up Watery Grave, and has exactly 2 cards in hand at that point. And then on my turn, I drew off the top Sword of Feast and Famine. So I don't sack Zur at the end of their turn. So I play a land, or sack Breya at the end of their turn. So I play a land, I cast Sword. My opponent uses Watery Grave to look at the top 3 cards and does not find a blue card. So I equip it and attack, and they throw away Force of Will because they have Force of Will. They have only 2 cards in hand, and one of them is Force of Will, and there's no blue card in the top 3 cards of their library. So I agree with that, actually. So they throw away Force of Will to the sword, and it untaps my mana, and it allows me to kill Zur and replay Breya immediately. So then my opponent on their turn, I can't remember what happens. I think they manage to lock out Breya with something like a Pithing Needle and then play Zur or something. Maybe that was the other game. I can't remember what happened. So basically, the issue is that my opponent they can't get their commander running because Breya is just there, constantly threatening, and they can't really build up a hand because Sword's eating away at both their hand and life total. And within a turn or two, my opponent scoops because I have enough. I'm actually able to. I remember what it was. They played like a series of a tutor chain, so something like Mystical Teachings into something, but weren't able to address the board quickly enough. And then I was able to equip Breya with the sword, smash in one more time, untap all my lands, and then start tapping lands to sack and kill my opponent. And then, of course, they scoop. So we'll go on to the next game here. So this 4th and final game against Darth Longsaber. Sorry, I didn't realize that was going to bug, but hopefully this one does not. All right, so I get first turn Sensei's Divining Top, and I have a Seal of Cleansing for an early artifact mana. I've got card selection. I've got modest speed, and I've got a Force of Will if I absolutely have to, and I can find a blue card. So I do find a blue card, so we'll start with that. There's a Disenchant on top, but I'm not actually seeing my opponent deploying targets. So I go ahead and play Seal of Cleansing here, hoping that my opponent won't fight me over it because I'll let them win if they do. And they don't. But that means that the next threat that they play is dealt with. The next artifact or enchantment that they play is dealt with, which is huge. And now I've got myself in a pretty good spot with Remand, Prudian Force Will, and I know that there's Enlightened Tutor on top. So my opponent goes for a Spellseeker here, and I'm going to go ahead and remand it for tempo so I can grab that Enlightened Tutor and then ET end of turn. And I go ahead and get Winter Orb. I go ahead and top as well so that I know what my next couple of cards are. Go for Orb. It sticks, so I go for Breya. And it sticks. So this looks really good for me. Seal of Cleansing, if they try to get out from under the orb. I can also seal away the orb if I need to. All right, so my opponent goes for Vindicate, targeting one orb. I force, and my opponent does not have force, nor do they have a Daze, and they scoop it up. Of course, as you know, the next card was a Snapcaster Mage, so it was definitely going to be a rough game for them because I have this Enlightened Tutor in the graveyard. So I could have untapped 2 lands, drawn Snapcaster, activated top, drawn the land that was underneath the Snapcaster, played the land, attacked for 6. And then at the end of my opponent's turn, Snapcaster, Enlightened Tutor for Skull Clamp. Untap a couple of mana sources, and then go ahead and play the Clamp, attack obviously, and then clamp the Snapcaster and draw a couple cards there, along with setting me up to draw basically a brand new hand of 7. If you look at my over the course of 2 turns, I would draw 2 off the Snapcaster, 1 for the draw step, and then 4 off the Thopters for a grand total of 7 cards over the course of 2 turns. So I was quickly going to refill my hand with that Snapcaster and land hiding on top. And so it had my opponent, stuck it out for that. Meanwhile, of course, smashing with Breya. And pretty good stuff there. So finally, I had a game against Solid Gold Telephone, and as it turns out, this was actually a good game too. I don't know this person. We didn't really have a conversation, but they showed up with a deck that was prepared to fight. However, not as well suited. Not a great commander. It doesn't really have recovery power. Grand Arbiter Augustin, we've talked about it before, I think many times on the channel. Basically, this commander is really only good when you have something like equivalent to the Darth Saber, Long Saber's turn 2 Breya. When you can do that with Arbiter, so like you get a, say, Ancient Tomb into Signet into Arbiter, or you get a Soul Ring draw or a Crypt or whatever. Then, and especially if you're going first, then the taxing effect can be make the opponent's gameplay super painful, and you can kind of just pin somebody down and lock them out of the game. It just takes forever to develop. But when you can't, this guy's kind of garbage because he doesn't control the board. He doesn't draw cards. He provides mana to some mild extent, but not a lot of it, and not really enough. So you'll see here, I go ahead and put Demonic Tutor on top. I ponder it anyway. Because I have preordains, I want to get, and I hide Demonic Tutor this way in case my opponent does some crazy thing where they, well, I don't know what they could do to make me discard, frankly, but there are cards, I suppose. Is there anything my opponent could have done there? If they had some insane amnesia turn 1 draw, I guess, unlikely though. Anyway, we'll carry on. So I'm going to go ahead and DT here. And it resolves, so I just go get Soul Ring and pass. Obviously setting up for a giant twist with the little Winter Orb action to go with it. Unfortunately, my opponent does find the card that makes their deck work, which is Soul Ring, and then inexplicably taps out for a Reflector Mage. Well, that's good enough for me, so I'll go hand here. And I get Counterspell, Counterspell, creature or threat removal card drawing. Anyway, my opponent top decks card drawing, so they get and a counterspell off of it. So they get to stop Breya for a turn. But see, here they're playing Grand Arbiter, and look, it just does nothing, right? Like, we've already gotten past the point when that card could really affect anything, and it just shows you the limitation, unfortunately, of Grand Arbiter. It's just a strictly worse commander than pretty much any other control commander. All right, so I'm going to pause it right here. So this is super cool tech, and I mentioned to my opponent that I basically applaud them for their use of tech, but unfortunately for them, I don't say unfortunately, but I say, however, I'm familiar with this trick. So what happens is I left 2 mana up for Breya so I could sack and kill Arbiter if I want to. My opponent, for example, my opponent might disenchant an orb, and then I sack the orb and a flyer and kill their Arbiter. Anyway, my opponent drew Terminus for the turn. So they revealed, so Terminus has 2 things going on. A miracle, most of you guys maybe already know this, but, a miracle reveals itself And that's a triggered ability that says, hey, I found a miracle. I have to show this to my opponent. And then the next thing that happens, so then that trigger resolves, and then the opponent, as it's resolving, the opponent says, well, do I want to play the miracle or not? If they do, they then replace the miracle's trigger by putting the miracle itself on the stack. If they don't, then the card just simply goes to, I think, the graveyard, or it goes to exile permanently. I can't remember, actually. I'll have to double check on that one. We'll check it in just a moment. But the bottom line is, it's show the miracle card and then play the miracle card. So what my opponent did was a very clever fake out. So what they did was they tapped the plains and they put the miracle effect on the stack. Now, if I thought that the miracle effect on the stack meant that my opponent was actually casting Terminus, and I responded by doing something crazy, like let's say I sack Breya and a Thopter so I can gain 5 life in response, since they're all going to die anyway. Then, when the opponent actually resolves the miracle trigger with 1 light floating, the next thing that happens is Terminus, they decide as a part of the resolution whether or not they want to actually cast Terminus. And if I sack my Breya, they'll say, no, I don't think I will. And I will have just killed my Breya without costing them anything. And actually, I think the card goes to their hand. Yeah, it does go to their hand. You can see they have 1 card in hand. So my opponent tried to pull a fast one on me. They tapped the white to make it really look like they were going to cast the miracle. They showed me the miracle effect. But I didn't take the bait. I waited for them to apply Terminus to the stack properly. Not the effect, but the card itself. And when they didn't, I knew that they were trying to be pretty clever. And I just congratulated them on a very clever play, but ultimately futile one. All right, so at the end of their turn, I'm going to kill Grand Arbiter, of course. And I sack my Winter Orb to do it because I drew a Factor Fiction for the turn. And now, of course, I know that they can't counter because they have Terminus. Oops, pause. I'm just going to run this Factor Fiction right out there. And so I sacked the Winter Orb and a land and a Thopter to kill the Grand Arbiter last turn because it's not really hurting them that much. It was a stall tactic, and I don't need it in play right now. So when I cast Factor Fiction, the split is Imperial Seal or top, land, and a card that fetches land. So the opponent's probably not happy about giving me top, but they certainly can't put it with Imperial Seal. So they decide, look, I either want Imperial Seal, which they know is going to break their back because I can do anything I want with it, right? Not immediately, but in a turn. Or I can have just a bunch of useless lands, and top hopefully doesn't find me anything too good. So they split it 4-1. Now, you know, if you understand this deck list, the Giving Me Expedition map is nowhere near the safe play that they thought it was. And I'm about to punish them pretty hard for that by not playing a land, instead running out Grim, sacking map, getting thrown, sacking throne, and having exactly 2 mana up so that I can kill Reflector Mage or sack Breya if I want to. But I am going to wait on that because I'd rather kill a Grand Arbiter or kill something in response. My opponent plays a Fate Spinner. I know they're holding Terminus. Yeah, I'm just going to let that go. Skip my combat phase for this turn. Play Shackles. Steal, top, of course. Take a peek. Hide Vampiric on top. And steal their Fate Spinner and draw a card. Now, I couldn't attack for the turn because that's the phase I chose to skip. My opponent then chooses to skip their combat phase. Plays Overburden, so this is not a good card, obviously. Whenever a player puts a non-token creature on the battlefield, they return a land. So this is part of their like stack C build, I guess. But it has no impact on me whatsoever. So at the end of their turn, so I got to draw the Vampiric off of the Monarch. And now I want the Fabricate as well. So at the end of their turn, I'm going to go ahead and activate top. And I'm going to activate top, and then with top's ability on the stack, I sacrifice top and the tapped Grim to kill their Reflector Mage. And because top is dead, I don't put it on top of my library. I get the card and get rid of the top that way. I probably didn't need to do this because I'm actually going to vamp. And I would have probably preferred to have Sensei's the Top somewhere still in my library. So that may have been a mistake. I could have just sacked the Thopter there. That's usually a clever play, but not in this case. Anyway, I have Vampiric for a Strip Mine, so then now they're 2 mana off from playing a Terminus. And knowing that they have nothing in their hand, I'm going to go fetch I could have gone and got a number of different plays here, but I decided I'm going to go get Crucible. I'm drawing 2 cards per turn already, so I don't necessarily need more cards. I just want to keep them off double white mana forever. So the other option, of course, would have been to go get... I could have gotten Sword of Feast and Famine and taken the last card out of their hand, but I think going for Crucible lock here is really good. Now I do play Trinket Mage here and use it to... I want more cards, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get Skull Clamp, and then I'm going to clamp the token, play a Coalition Relic off of the floating Workshop mana, copy the clamp, and then double equip it to their Fate Spinner and draw 4 cards and leave 2 mana up for Breya, and then throw away some cards I don't need. Now, the reason I was doing all that was I was digging for a counter because I want to make sure that this game gets put away and my opponent cannot recover at all. So the easiest way to do that is to continue to strip while finding myself a counterspell. So I had to dig a million cards down to find one, but eventually I did find one. Although I only have 2 mana up, so I can't play Forbid this turn, but next turn I've got them because Mystic will come down, fetch me Sword. They'll be in permanent Crucible strip lock combined with Sword of Feast and Famine, keeping their hand empty. 2 cards per turn off the Monarch, and Forbid fueling it. I don't even need Necro here. I just continuously hit them with Forbid with buyback. And since they can never have more than 1 card in hand at a time, they're mathematically locked out of the game. Of course, with me drawing 4 cards off their creature right there, they just scoop. Obviously, if they didn't, I could hit them for 4, 5, 6, and then double clamp the Trinket as well, you know, and draw an additional 4 cards. So I'm definitely going to get a counter here if I didn't have one in this hand. So even if my opponent had like Amnesia and took all of my playables, I would draw a card for the turn, draw 4 more cards, and then draw a card at the end of the turn. So I'm going to draw 6 cards. So my opponent just totally gives up. Clearly their stacks lockout plan. Not effective here. I've actually put them in the bind that they're trying to put me in, and I don't need a bad commander to do it. So anyway, lots of interesting games. Hopefully you enjoyed. I really love these games against Darth Longsaber, and I enjoyed this game against Solid Gold Telephone quite a bit because I love playing the control-on-control battles or the blue-on-blue fights. I think that's Magic at its finest. It really requires a lot of... you need to know your deck really well. You need to understand as much as you can about what the opponent's trying to do and where their pressure points are and how they're going to try to fight with you. It's just an interesting, I don't know, to me it's interesting. So hopefully you thought so and you enjoyed it. And thank you to Darth Longsaber for, I think, improving the deck. I do think that this wastes over the 3rd island and adding frag does improve the deck. I could have gone back to Vandalblast, but Vandalblast, if you notice, the games were real slugs, right? Like, they're just back and forth beatings. I'm unlikely to ever have a game like that where I'm able to kick a Vandalblast. But in the meantime, if I want to simulate it, I just need to draw some Fragmentized Seal, Disenchant, Faden, the ready type stuff. I can always will at some point and replay these and do it that way. So will is going to be my kind of version of Vandalblast, I think, in this deck. I like Fragmentize better because early on I want to fetch white. And, for example, if my land is Verdant Catacombs and my opponent goes turn 1 Soul Ring and this is my fetch, I've got a hand with like Verdant Island, right? I sack Verdant Catacombs. If this is Vandalblast, I have to go get Badlands. And then this mana base is kind of weak. If it's Fragmentize, then I go get Scrub, and this mana base is strong, you know, because those are my main colors. And I play the Fragmentize. So that's another reason. But also killing Sylvan Library and killing Search for Iskanta, Fragmentize can do, and VB cannot. So let me know what you think. Hopefully you enjoyed those games. I have one more video. I probably do maybe talking about some of these test decks that I put together, but I'll wait till I have some more gameplay for that. And lastly, if you keep an eye out, not in the commander section most likely, but in the other section, I think. Well, I'll figure it out. Anyway, I'm going to upload a video that is very long. If you thought this was long. And it's got Brian Weissman and I playing tandem on Skype and discussing his new deck prior to his big reveal. So if you haven't seen his new deck, go check out his deck on Brian Weissman's channel, and then come back here when I get that second video uploaded, and you can see the precursor, the prelude. I just didn't want to upload it before he did his deck because I didn't want to be a spoiler. All right, that's all I've got. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.